I wanted to create a place where the trials and tribulations of life become transformative testimonies. A place where everyday individuals from all walks of life courageously open up about the challenges that have passed and the challenges that will last. A place to celebrate the beauty of faith, the resilience of the human spirit, and the profound impact of sharing our journeys with one another. I'm Heather Patterson. Welcome to Blood, Sweat, and Tears. Hey, welcome back to the Blood, Sweat, and Tears podcast. Today, we're diving into part 2 of a 2-part series with our incredible guest, Amanda Elliot. If you haven't listened to part 1, you guys, go back and listen to it today and listen to the entire 2-part series because there are so many golden nuggets of hope to be found in her words. With that being said, here's Amanda with her continued story of God's faithfulness.
I trust the same God who did that can bring this one man, just one man, who is the desire of my heart. That is it. I don't need to date 15 people. I just need the one man who is the desire, who meets the desires of my heart that I've told the Lord. And he did. I mean, he would tell me something about himself and I'm like, check.
Yeah.
check.
Yeah. But I love that you already had that confidence, like to the average person or the other person, they're going, what do you mean? How are you going to find somebody if you're not dating? I mean,
They did. They
it
thought
didn't
I was
even
stupid.
register.
They were like, well, that's stupid. And the standards that I had at that point, I was in my late 30s. I had a 2-year-old and I was like, there are things that I am not going to do and I'm not going to be moved on that. And people were like, well, then nobody's going to date you.
Yeah.
Because
you're like, yeah, they will.
whatever, it's the.
You're like, I'm confident there will be.
I'm confident. There will
Just
be a
sit
man.
back and watch. Yep.
And he did, and so it truly was like this miraculous experience. We were able to find each other, get married, and then we moved back to Arkansas. And I would, what I would say is like the testimony that the Lord has kind of given me of my life began shortly after we moved back to Arkansas. And one of the reasons I wanted to move back so badly was, I laugh now in retrospect, but my sister was pregnant with her 3rd baby. And I was like, to me, like having 3 kids was like having 15 kids. I was
It
like,
is. It is like having 15 kids. And then you have the dogs, and then you've got 25 kids.
right.
Then you've become the Duggars overnight. It does. It happens like that.
You just wake up one day. But it's so funny in retrospect. It seemed like I had one child. She had 2 children, and she was going to have a 3rd. And the Lord called us back to Arkansas was what happened. But in my heart, I had wanted to move back for years and years and wasn't able to. And one of the reasons I really at that time wanted to move back was because I was like, I'm going to help her. Like she's my sister. She's my best friend. I'm like, I'm going to help her take care of this 3rd baby because I'm sure she's just going to be like so overwhelmed with life with a 3rd baby. And, it's super funny now in retrospect because what ended up happening was I moved here and was probably a little helpful. But what happened was my husband was diagnosed with lymphoma. And 1 month before that, we found out I was pregnant. And when he was diagnosed, I knew that he would live. Like the Lord gave me great confidence that he would live, that he would be alive. And my prayer became that he would be finished with chemo before we had our baby. Because I was like, I am 39 years old, which in maternity years is like, 642.
Yeah, it's like Sarah and Abraham.
Sarah and Abraham. She said, I'm like Sarah over here. I'm like, I've got gray hair and I'm like enormously pregnant. And so I would think, selfishly, I cannot take care of this baby. Like you have, like, I know the Lord will preserve your life, but also like, this sister's going to need some help.
You need to come through over here.
Yeah. Baby. So like, you got to be done with chemo. You got to be done with chemo. And so that became my prayer that he would be finished with chemo before we had the baby. And I was physically exhausted and, I don't want to say like emotionally maxed out, but it was emotionally like difficult worse in a way that I hadn't experienced before. It wasn't better or worse than other difficult things I'd been through, but it was extremely emotionally painful in a way that would never have expected, that
Mhm.
nobody had ever told me. It was like, I guess like a childish way to put it is like, it hurt my feelings. Like, it hurt my feelings that he had cancer, you
Right.
know? It made me sad.
Mhm.
I couldn't stand to see someone. He is like an extremely like physically strong and emotionally strong. He's like a very bold, very present. Like, if you've ever met him, you're not like, I'm not sure if he was there or not. Like, you know that he was there.
Uh-huh.
That is
No,
who
like,
he
what's
is.
interesting is what I said when it started. I have not met you, but I've met your husband,
You met
and
my
so,
husband. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, he's solid, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so to see him go through something, I'd seen him go through, physical pain before. And he's like a big tough guy. And so when you're a big tough guy, you get hurt and you just like rub dirt in it and just go on with life. But cancer is not that. Cancer isn't like getting knocked down. Cancer is like being like drugged behind a wagon for an extended period of time
Mhm.
through multiple conditions, with like sometimes with people throwing things at you. It's like it's the long haul, and it's day in and day out, and it's up and down and up and down. And I was pregnant, and so I was like in the chemo unit, like with raging morning sickness, and just like, like leaning on the Lord. And there were times that I felt didn't feel well. And so I would drive to chemo, and then I would start feeling kind of sick while we're there while he's getting chemo. And then he would have to he would drive
Oh
home,
my gosh.
Um,
You're probably
and
thinking, is this real life right now?"
is this real life? I'm like, and Evelyn, her name's Evelyn, is our baby's name. I call her our baby. She's 5 years old now. But we found out 1 month before the cancer, we found out that we were pregnant. And that was really exciting. It was very like, we were really, really, really happy to have a baby. And he's 2 years older than me. So we were 39 and 41 at the time. And not that that's like out of the realm, but for me, it was like, we didn't, even neither one of us, like we had kind of thought that having children was something that was in the past. And
Mhm.
so we were really happy to have a baby. And I knew that it was like, she was like this symbol of new life. Like, she also was like a living, breathing in my womb, like, promise from the Lord. And when I was pregnant with her and he was going through chemo, I felt a lump in my breast. And I was in worship one day, and the Lord very clearly said, when it's all said and done, you and your girl will be okay. And when he said that, it was like,
And you didn't know yet,
I
did
didn't
you?
know. No, I did
What
not
you
know.
were
I
having?
did not know. And so, I went to the doctor, and the doctor was not concerned about the lump at all. And I would continue to like share I'm like, does not seem normal. This does not seem normal. And would just flat out tell me like, don't worry about it. Like, there's no tests we can do anyway. Don't worry about it. And when she said there were no tests we could do and just walked out of the room, I knew for a fact that they could do an ultrasound on my breast. I knew for a fact that they could put like a lead apron on me and do a mammogram. I knew those things
Right.
because I knew women who had done those things. So when she said that, it was like a Friday. And that weekend, the Lord brought to mind an old friend from when I was a magazine editor at a women's magazine, who had um, passed away. But they did not know she had breast cancer until she was stage 4, because she found the lump while she was nursing. And the doctor dismissed it because he was like, it's probably just a plugged milk duct. You don't need to worry
Mhm.
about it. And by the time that somebody was worried about it, she had stage 4 cancer. And that I interviewed her at that point, and she lived for years after that miraculously. They said she may not live to see the story that you're writing about her. She may not live to see it published. And she had 2 little boys. And she was like, I want to live long enough to make sure they are not buttholes when they grow up. That's what she told me. But she used, she did
I
not
get
use the
that,
word
I
butt.
get that. I so
And,
get that. I feel that.
she was a fighter. She was like she had been a Marine. She was very intense, um, just really feisty, very determined, and she lived for years after that, but she did eventually pass away from cancer. And she wasn't somebody I thought about a whole lot. We didn't stay super, in touch, and she'd been passed away for a while, and so I knew I'm like, there's a reason that I cannot get this woman off my mind. And that's part of that whole discernment. The Lord will bring people to your mind or he'll bring stories. And it's really easy to just dismiss as like, oh, I'm having like an ADD moment or a flash of something that doesn't really mean anything. But I think discernment is you start to lean into and you start to ask. And not everything means something. Some
Right.
things are just like a thought that pops in your head. But the older I get, the more the Lord has shown me, like, when he brings a person to mind or a situation or a song or whatever it is, to really, like, lean into it, really
Mhm.
ask him, really explore it and see what does it mean and why are you bringing that to
Yeah,
to
like, take
mind?
note of that.
Take note. And so with her, I knew immediately. I mean, it was very obvious. I was like, okay, I'm not supposed to just like be peaceful and move on with my life with this lump. I'm supposed to pursue it. And so I did. And it was breast cancer. And so when they called to tell me that it was breast cancer, my son was walking in the door from school and I was extremely pregnant and he was 7 years old at the time and they had were like talking to me like right as he walked in. I'm getting off the phone, and so it was one of those moments that I'm like, once again, I'm like, okay, am I going to freak out? Am I going to let him see me like become this like very undone person? Up until that point, we had not told him that my husband had cancer. So we told him that he was sick and the medicine made him look tired
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
because has a big beard, his beard fell out, and he lost weight, and he got, like, a lot more, like, narrow and just, he just didn't look like himself. So, I mean, you couldn't miss that he was sick,
Right.
but he didn't understand the word cancer.
Right.
And so when I got diagnosed, it was shocking, but the Lord also had again he had prepared me for it in the weeks leading up to that. I mean, I had prayed in total faith, total and absolute faith that it would not be cancerous and that if it was cancerous that the tumor would disappear. I did all of the things, all the
Mhm.
things. And, at that time was in a church environment that was much more like you go down front and people, like, literally put their hands on you and they pray over you and they put anointing oil on you like it says in the New Testament. I did all of those things with 100% faith that the tumor would have to disappear, and it did not disappear. And so then you start to ask the Lord, like and ask yourself, "Okay, what do I really believe?" And this morning, I heard a pastor say that Jesus did not come to resolve the situation with Rome. He didn't come and overthrow Rome because Rome was a temporary problem. And he came to solve an eternal problem.
Mhm.
And I was like, there's a reason I heard that today. And I saw that all through walking through the journey with cancer was that I know the Lord did solve, and he did give us huge, huge miracles. I mean, tremendous miracles that he gave us through cancer. But he was not just solving the temporary problem, which cancer is a temporary problem. He was solving the eternal problem,
Mhm.
which was refining me and working stuff out of me that I did not know that I had left
Yeah,
because
because you were like, "Hey, God, didn't we do this 20 years ago?"
yeah, like, we're good. I'm
Yeah, we're
good.
good.
Like, I'm following you. I'm, like, teaching and I'm, like, praying out loud all the time now without
Uh-huh.
having a freak out. I don't sweat at all. I'm, like, doing these things that you've asked me to do. My husband's leading worship, and we're doing all of these things, and so you start to realize and I had prayed and after that prayed as well, do not let me teach wrong. Do not let me reflect you incorrectly. And so walking through what we did change some of, like, I don't want to say the details because they're big things, but once you get into faith and like theology and what people believe about the supernatural and, you know, being called a Christian or a follower of Christ means such different things to different people.
Yeah.
And figuring out where you fit in with all of that and what your theology really is. Do you believe that God heals everyone? And do you believe that he just heals some people sometimes? Do you believe that it matters whether you pray out loud over someone and put your hands on them or if you pray privately? All of those things, once it's like it can get really confusing
Yeah, no doubt.
once
No,
you really
agree.
start to
Yeah.
follow the Lord. I mean, it's kind of like anything else. You say, I'm going to show up and I'm going to do this. And you think that's the biggest part of it. And you just started.
Mhm.
Like, oh, that was just the beginning. I didn't
Uh-huh.
know. I didn't know the details of it.
Well,
Um,
so, I mean, like, y'all so, I mean, just to it's so hard to wrap my head around. I mean, your husband had cancer, you're pregnant,
mhm.
and now you have cancer.
Yes.
This is all happening at the same time. Was there
All
ever a
having the same.
moment that you were, just to be transparent, angry about it? Were you ever angry with God or
I
just like
wasn't.
screaming, "Why is this happening?"
No,
Or
I
no?
wasn't. I
Okay.
had a really, really strong sense of confidence because of the kind of newfound church environment that I had space that I'd moved into. So I had gone
Mhm.
from being what I would consider like more Baptist, more like what I would consider like more conservative, spiritually conservative in some ways. I
Uh-huh.
moved from that to being what most people would call kind of charismatic. And so leading up to that, I had started before we ever got sick or anything like that, I started to see miracles happen. Like literally see my husband pray over people and then be healed. I had
Oh,
never
wow.
seen that before.
Wow.
I had seen people, like I said, you are in your prayer closet and you're praying and, someone is healed through medicine or something happens that could be that people from the outside could say is circumstantial, but in your heart is the Lord.
Mhm.
But before we got sick, before we got cancer, that was the first time in my life I had started to really see and really believe that like radical miracles can and do happen right now in our day and age in front of you. Because there's so much of that I know is not real. There's so much of it
Mhm.
that's fake.
Mhm.
But that doesn't mean that it's all fake.
Right.
I'm like some of it is real. He is able. He's
Right.
completely able. It's never an
Yeah.
issue of ableness. And so that's the other question that you wrestle with. Once you begin to believe God is entirely able, I have total confidence that he's able and willing to do it for me. And then he doesn't.
Mhm.
And so you kind of wrestle through, you don't kind of, I mean, it is like a full blown wrestling match sometimes. But my confidence, because of my belief system at the time, and I still believe most of what I believed then, some of it has kind of changed as I've continued to walk through it. But one of the big things was that I believed that the enemy had come to destroy me.
Mhm.
And so what happened was I got mad at Satan. I was
Mhm.
like ticked off. And that was a lot of me going, I was on Facebook all the time then. I was like, I've deleted my Facebook account since then,
I
strangely
know.
enough. But
I went to message you the other day, and then I was like,
yeah,
"Where'd she go?"
but I was on there a lot and I was making a lot of videos. There were a lot of people that I was communicating with, a lot of people I was messaging with. People came out of the woodwork. I mean, people I knew, people I didn't know, close friends of my sister, close friends of my mom, or even my aunt. All these different people were sending me letters and were showing up. And I feel like the Lord gave me a opportunity to glorify him.
Mhm.
And I was ready and willing to take it. It was not a burden. I was happy to do it because I was like, you enemy have come for my family. That's what I would feel like. I would be like,
Mhm.
you came to destroy me. Like you came not just to be like annoy me. You came to actually kill me and this beautiful child that God gave me as a gift. I'm like, Evelyn is my gift and you have come for her
And
and
now
you
I
I used
am
to say,
ticked
you will
off.
I'm ticked off. I was like full mama bear mode. And I was already in mama bear mode over my husband because I was like, God gave me that man. You are not taking him to the grave. Like, you
Mhm.
are not killing the gift that God gave me. And then the same thing with me. I was like, you are not going to shut me up. Like, it has taken me this long to get to a place where I'm willing to be overt and open my mouth and pray over people and do all those things. I was like, I used to say, you will absolutely regret the day you gave me cancer. You will wish you had never given me cancer because it is going to give me an opportunity to glorify God that I would never have if you had kept me healthy.
Mhm.
I was like,
Wow.
I was mad at,
Wow.
I was mad at the enemy. And it was,
Yeah.
I had changed before that, and in the years leading up to it, I had shifted my view so much of, instead of saying, God, why did you let this happen, to saying, I know the enemy brought this into my life and I'm mad at you for bringing it into my life. But then also saying, and this has happened in the later years, also saying, Lord, I know that you are sovereign and that somehow this passed through your hands.
Mhm.
I don't believe it was like your idea.
Right.
I mean, God is in control of everything, and yet we have free will.
Right.
So it's that never ending question of, what is God's sovereignty? What is enemy activity? And what does God allow? And when I was in the middle of it, I could not think a lot about what God had allowed.
Why was
And
that? Why do you think?
I think because it would hurt my feelings.
Yeah.
Because I would be like, "Well, why would you do that to me? Why would
Uh-huh.
you let this happen to me, God? You're good and you love me." And so I would say that over and over again. I'm like, I know God is good and I know he loves me. So I know if he has allowed this, and I know that he has because I know that he's sovereign.
Mhm.
He has allowed this, that it's somehow for my good.
Yeah.
And also the reality that, only God saves, only Jesus saves. Only
Right.
Jesus saves. We do not save people. But I do believe, if God wanted him saving people to be the only way people are saved, then he would just come down on earth right now and
Mhm.
just walk around in human form again and say, "Do you want to be saved? Do you want to be saved?" But instead, he has us to do it.
Uh-huh.
And so it's this huge responsibility, and that's what he showed me too, whether or not people go to heaven can hinge on the fact that either you're obeying me or you're not obeying me. And it's not
Mhm.
about you, but it's about me working through you.
Right.
And are you gonna do it? Are you gonna
You
do
made a
it?
good point. One of my dearest friends, she knows the Bible like the back of her hand, and she's such a great prayer warrior, but she's that quiet prayer warrior. If you need a
Mhm,
prayer, she's going to pray for you. She's going to be there.
mhm.
She's going to cover you constantly. And she was asked to step up and be a leader, to lead a women's group. And she's like, I just don't think I can. I just want to give my testimony. I don't want to do that. And I shut her down. I go, it's not about you. It never was.
There was.
It's about him.
Right,
It's
right.
about God. And she
And it
looked
is.
at me and she goes, you are so right. You're so right. I mean, okay, and she went from that day, she made that commitment,
Uh-huh.
to go forward with it. But yeah, it's not about us.
It's not about us.
No.
And when you really figure out, like, that God can really and truly, I don't wanna say use, but I mean, he does what only God can do with things that we think are useless or are, irrelevant, or that are just really uncomfortable that we don't wanna do. And speaking was one of those things for me. I had told people for years that I didn't speak in public. Like, I was like, "I don't do that." I mean, I would agree to do all sorts of different things that had an element of public speaking, and I would say, "I'll do this, but I will not be the one that gets up and speaks." It was like, they're like, "Do you wanna be a chair of this," ironically enough, of the American Cancer Society's gala when I was, pregnant with Wilder and before I'd gotten pregnant with him. And we had a black and white ball, and I was the chair of it. And I was like, I'll do it as long as I don't have to speak. And they're like, that's literally the easiest part. Like, that's literally
It
the easiest part.
seriously is. It is.
And I was like, yeah, but I don't do that. So just find an honorary chair. I don't care if they say they did the whole thing. It doesn't matter to me. I don't care, but I'm not doing that
Uh-huh.
part. And I stood firm on that. Like, I was the editor of a magazine and we would have events, and I'm like, I'm not standing up there. They're like, you're the appropriate person to do it. And I'm like, but I'm not doing
Uh-huh.
it. And I
Yeah.
refused. And the Lord worked that out of me by giving me a job. I did not have a job, and got a job with a secular, I think is the best term to use, secular publication that was very much more like left leaning, not conservative, um, sort of publication doing fashion and style. And they had a fashion awards, and they had hired me to be in charge of this whole area, lifestyle area of the publication. And this was like the big event that they did. And they were just very clear and very nonchalant about, like, well, you'll be the MC of it, you and another editor. And I knew immediately I cannot say no. Like, it's like my job hinges
Mhm.
on it.
Yeah,
I can't be
yeah.
like, I choose to not do that. It'd be like, they'd
Right,
be
or
like,
you can't
we
pay the
hired
bills next
you.
month. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Like, we hired you like 5 minutes ago, and this is part of your new job description. So you will do it. And they were nice about it, but I knew they were not kidding,
Uh-huh.
and that I couldn't just brush it off. And I was in probably a full blown panic attack for like 2 days straight leading up till then, like just physically sick at the idea of doing it. And they were going to give me a script. They gave me a, like an
Like, you didn't have
actual,
to
like,
come
I
up with
can
it by
read it.
yourself. You just had to
No, but
read
I
it off the
was
paper.
just had to read it, was absolutely terrified. But that was like ripping off the band-aid
Mhm.
of being able to, like, stand up and speak. And then once I submitted my life to the Lord, and I really felt like the Lord was speaking through me, it's not that it got easier, because it definitely got more serious at that point, because you're like, I am representing the Lord. I'm either teaching his word or sharing this testimony, and it matters, like, for eternity.
Mhm.
It matters in light of heaven, in light of,
Right.
I'm gonna have to stand in front of God and answer for how I represent him.
Uh-huh.
And, but it wasn't that long ago that I was that person who said it over and over again. I will never, I will never, I will never. And so that's another huge lesson that I've had. Like, don't, I'm like,
Never say
don't,
never. Never
literally
say
never
never.
say never. Like, yeah, I'm not doing that. I don't do that. Well, God may be like, I want you
Mhm.
to do that.
Oh, yes, you will.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, you will,
You
and
just
empower
wait.
you, and he'll
Uh-huh.
empower you to do it. That's the thing, is that, you know, he empowers whatever he calls us to do. And I knew that before we went through cancer, and I felt it as we were going through cancer. So I was like 29 weeks pregnant, I think, when I began chemo. And so my husband was still doing chemo, and every Tuesday was chemo day. So he would go one Tuesday, I would go the next Tuesday. And people would just, bring us food and be, really helpful and wonderful. But at the end of the day, at like 2 in the morning, when you have chemo symptoms, or, whatever it is, it's just you and
Mhm.
the Lord and
Yeah.
your spouse. And
Yeah.
I felt thankful that I knew, at least by some measure, maybe how my husband felt caring for me, because I had cared for him. And he did such a wonderful job caring for me, even though he was also going through chemo. Um, and I know we have a deep understanding for each other, because we went through that, and we both know what it's like on the other side. Because being
Mhm.
a caregiver is really, really difficult. And when you're going through cancer, it's very easy, or through something that's terrible, it's very easy to feel like either you don't want help, you're like, I don't want help. I don't want anybody to help me. Or you feel like um you have no idea how awful this is, and it can't possibly be even remotely as difficult for you as it is for me. But I had just done it on the other
Yeah.
side.
Yeah.
And so I knew that wasn't true. I knew, because me caring for him and makes me cry still, me seeing how hard it was on him. There were parts of that it was harder than for me to have it myself.
Wow.
Because when you really love someone, you know how it is. When you really love someone, there are times where you just saying you think, I would just rather it be me.
Yeah. And
I don't
like
I
you
don't
said,
want
the
you to have
fact
to
that
do
he
this.
was just s basically like a physical example of strength in your home and
Yes,
in your relationship, and to see him weak and vulnerable, I'm sure,
yes.
um, was difficult.
It was, and I I called our pastor one day and I said, "I just need to know if I'm, like, okay, like, if I'm being, like, tormented by the enemy or, like, something's wrong with me or if I'm not having faith," because before I was diagnosed and he was starting to show, like, the physical, realities of chemo, I would just cry, and
Mhm.
I would, like, go in the bedroom. I'd be like, "I need to go get some out of the bedroom," and I just go in the bedroom. I'd just sit there and just cry, just cry. Like, I
Do
would
your
look at this picture of
screams into the
him.
pillow and
Yes, yes. I would look at a picture of him that was on this shelf where he would sit very often, and he was just like this, like all systems go, like very, very strong, like fierce, intense person. And then he's sitting here in front of me, and it looks like two completely different people.
yeah.
And there was something about that contrast that just broke my heart, and I
Uh-huh.
would just cry. And so I thought that meant that I, like, didn't have faith or that I wasn't hopeful enough or something like that. You get in weird places and you think strange things when you're walking through I think I do. I get in weird places sometimes when I walk through, like, a really long season that's difficult. You can start to believe things that you're like, "I don't know if that's true
Uh-huh.
or
No,
not."
I identify with that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but, I mean, of course, Jesus never did stray from that, but he definitely he cried, you
Right?
know?
He
So,
cried.
yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. Okay. Okay. Well, so, I don't wanna take up all of your time the rest of the day, though I could, totally. Um, I do tell me, do you have a Bible verse that you went to, that you leaned on during, the cancer trial? And
Yes.
what was that?
Yes.
And why did you choose that one?
I have actually a whole album of verses. There's probably like
Amazing.
20 verses, and I would sit and I would read every single one of them. The main verse, though, that I would say that I've said through every trial we've been through is Romans 8:28,
Okay.
that all things work together for the good of those who love Christ, who are called according to his purpose. And so I would say over and over again, my job is to love Jesus and to answer the calling. If I
Mm,
do that,
mm.
then I can trust that the rest will work out. All things don't work out. They don't. All things, just like in the whole earth, don't work out. But I know that God will work out this end of things if I do, if I love him, and if I answer the call that he's called me according to his purpose. And I would ask people, I would say that. And there's a verse in Jeremiah that says, "Heal me and I'm healed, save me and I'm saved, for thou art my praise." And those two verses, there were like three verses that every person who prayed for us, I would message them and say, "I am praying these verses and I am asking you
To
to
pray
out
with.
loud, please pray these verses over my family."
Oh,
And so
I
that
love them.
is, I believe, a really powerful way to walk through trials is to see a verse that the Lord has spoken to you and then ask all of your people to agree with you
On that
to pray
verse.
that verse. I
Uh-huh.
think there's power in that, in
I know
unity.
there's power in that. I love that, and I think that's the most perfect way to end this time together. I love that. Thank you so much for that message, and thank you for your transparency and for taking the time
Thank
to be with
you.
us. Oh, just so
Thank you. It's an
special.
honor.
Thanks so much for listening. I'd love for you to join me on Instagram and YouTube at bsandtpodcast. That's B as in blood, S as in sweat, AND, T as in tears, podcast. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode, reminding you that the battle has already been won.